I've always loved hiking alone. The solitude, the quiet, the feeling of being truly away from everything. But after what happened last fall, I don't go into the woods anymore. It was late October, and I had driven up to a secluded trail deep in the Appalachian Mountains. I planned to camp overnight, enjoy the crisp air, and maybe even catch some wildlife with my camera. I'd been to this area before, but never this deep into the woods. The air felt different, heavier. Maybe it was the season, the way the dying leaves clung to the branches like they didn't want to let go. Or maybe it was something else. I started my hike around noon, moving at a steady pace, stopping now and then to take pictures of the golden canopy overhead. About 3 miles in, I passed an old wooden sign nailed to a tree. The letters were worn away, barely visible under layers of moss and decay. It must have once marked the trail, but I couldn't read a word of it. I pushed on. By the time I reached a clearing, the sun was dipping behind the mountains. The sky turned a deep orange, casting long shadows that made the trees seem taller, darker. I found a decent spot to set up camp, a flat patch of earth surrounded by thick forest on 3 sides. The trail was barely visible from here, just the way I liked it. As I gathered wood for a fire, I noticed something strange. The forest had gone quiet. No rustling leaves, no distant hoots of owls or chittering squirrels, just silence. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Animals go quiet when a predator is near. Maybe a coyote or a black bear was passing through. I kept my knife close, my flashlight within reach, and settled in by the fire, letting the heat and flickering light ease my nerves. But then, around midnight, I heard it. A voice. At first, it was distant, a soft murmuring sound just beyond the tree line. It was faint, almost like the wind, but there was something off about it, something deliberate. I strained my ears, trying to make out words. It sounded like a person, but the way they spoke was strange, like someone trying to form words through a mouthful of water. Then I heard my name, clear as day. Whispered, stretched out like a breath against my ear. I froze. My blood turned to ice. My flashlight beam cut through the trees, but there was nothing there. Then, the voice came again, from the opposite side of my camp. I spun around, heart hammering. I should have called out, but something in my gut told me not to. And then, the sound of movement. Not an animal. This was different. It was deliberate, slow, steady footsteps, circling me, crunching the dry leaves underfoot. My hands tightened around my knife. I forced myself to breathe, to think. It had to be another camper messing with me, right? Maybe someone saw my fire and decided to have a little fun. But then I realized something. I was miles from the nearest campsite. I hadn't passed another soul on the way up here. And the footsteps. They weren't retreating. They were getting closer. I turned in every direction, scanning the trees, but my flashlight barely cut through the dense forest. The fire flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced between the trunks. Then, just beyond the glow of my dying fire, I saw it. A shape. It was standing just at the edge of the light, half hidden in the trees. It was tall, too tall, at least 7 feet, its limbs just slightly too long. But what made my stomach drop was its face. It looked like a man, but its skin was stretched too tight over its bones, its mouth just slightly too wide, its eyes hollow and dark. And then, it did something that sent ice through my veins. It spoke again, but this time, it mimicked my own voice. "Who's there?" it said, same tone, same inflection. But it wasn't right. The words came out garbled, almost glitching, like a recording played through broken speakers. Then it took a step forward. My body finally caught up with my brain. I grabbed my pack, my flashlight, and bolted. I ran faster than I ever have in my life, crashing through branches, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't care about the trail. I just needed to put distance between me and that thing. Behind me, the voice called out again. But now it wasn't just my voice. It was others. A mix of tones, different pitches, overlapping like a broken radio, all speaking at once. My legs burned. My lungs screamed. But I didn't stop. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually I saw it. My car, sitting in the small dirt lot at the edge of the woods. I didn't slow down. I yanked open the door, threw myself inside, and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the keys. Then, as I fumbled to start the engine, I heard it. A tap. A soft, deliberate tap on my window. I didn't look. I couldn't look. I slammed my foot on the gas, speeding down the winding road, my headlights barely cutting through the mist rolling in from the hills. I didn't stop driving until I was hours away, parked at some gas station off the highway, my hands still gripping the wheel, white-knuckled. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been a trick of the dark, my mind playing games. Maybe I was just sleep-deprived, spooked by the isolation. But then, I checked my phone. A video file, taken sometime in the middle of the night. It was me, standing in my own campsite. Except, I don't remember ever leaving my tent. And the worst part? As the video played, the me on the screen slowly turned its head and smiled. I don't have much time to write this. It's getting dark, and I know it will return to find me. I understand you might be confused, so am I. But I'll start from the beginning, as best as I can. All names have been changed for privacy, except mine. This happened a couple of months ago during a 4-day hiking trip up an unnamed mountain. It was the second night when everything changed. "How much longer?" Ashley asked, panting as she wiped sweat from her forehead. "Told you it'd be a while," I teased. "We're hiking for 4 days, remember?" "Asshole," she muttered under her breath. "Watch it. No swearing in front of the kid," Daryl said, nudging Milo. "I'm not a kid," Milo huffed. At 5 feet 4 inches, he was the shortest in the group, while the rest of us ranged from 5 feet 6 inches to 5 feet 9 inches. Daryl just chuckled and pulled him into a side hug. They had been together for 3 years, and Daryl was planning to propose on this trip. That's why I brought my camera, to capture the moment. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky turned a murky shade of purple. We needed to set up camp before dark, or we'd risk running into the wolves that prowled these woods. While Daryl and I pitched the tents, Ashley and Milo gathered firewood. Then I heard it. A low, guttural growl deep in the trees. The sound crawled down my spine and settled in my stomach like a rock. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. "Hear what?" Daryl asked, his voice uneasy. He was the biggest of us, but also the most paranoid. He hated the woods at night. A sharp, piercing howl split the air. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't any animal I had ever heard before. "Oh my God!" Milo sprinted out of the woods, firewood scattering from his arms. "Did you hear that? That thing? That wasn't a wolf." It growled and then, "Yes, Milo, we heard it," Ashley said, her face pale. Daryl's face twisted in confusion. "I didn't hear anything." We exchanged glances. Daryl was the only one who hadn't heard it. "We need to leave," I said. Ashley shook her head. "We can't. We'd never make it down the trail at night. The cliffs, the uneven ground. We'd get ourselves killed. Whatever's out there probably already knows where we are." She was right. We decided to stay put but take turns standing watch, each armed with a hunting knife. I was third on watch. Daryl was first, but I noticed he never went to sleep. Every 10 minutes, he peeked out of his tent, scanning the tree line. I think he knew, maybe not what it was, but that something was out there. We left at dawn, abandoning our tents and supplies. We made record time down the mountain, reaching the parking lot in half the time it should have taken. Just as we threw our bags into the back of Daryl's truck, I turned to look one last time. A figure stood at the edge of the woods. It had the shape of a wolf, but its limbs were wrong, too long, too thin. Its skin hung loose in places, and its eyes were human. We didn't speak the entire 6-hour drive home. That night, we stayed at Daryl's place, thinking we were safe. We weren't. A week later, I saw the news. Breaking. 3 found dead in their homes. Victims stripped of blood, their skin left beside them. Authorities calling it the blood murders. Victims identified as Ashley, Milo, and Daryl. I dropped my coffee. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely breathe. It had found them, and I knew it was coming for me next. The first night alone, I heard it. Soft tapping at my window. A second-floor window. I tried to tell myself it was the wind, but then it knocked. Harder this time. Then came the voice. "Amy, let me in." I knew that voice. It was Daryl's. But Daryl was dead. I stayed frozen in bed, not moving, not breathing. The knocking turned to pounding, each hit rattling the glass. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I think I'll let it in. That's what it wants, right? If I survive, I'll tell you what happens next. But I don't think I will.